All right, welcome everybody to Chapter 6, which deals with employee learning, which is training, orientation, and development. You may note that we have a new background. Okay, if you take a look in the background here, it's quite a nice background, and that is actually Port Arthur, Australia, in Tasmania. And you're going to wonder, well, what's so important about Port Arthur? Well, it's basically a prison camp, or an abandoned prison camp back from the 1800s or 1700s, 1800s, early 1900s. As some of you know, Australia was a place where Great Britain sent all its bad people, known as banishment, back in the day. So the criminals all went to Australia. And if you didn't do really well in Australia, if you screwed up in Australia, in the mainland, they sent you to the island of Tasmania. And then if you screwed up in Tasmania, they would send you actually to this peninsula at the end of Tasmania called Port Arthur. So this was where the really, really, really badasses went, criminals back in the day. So, and I was fortunate enough to visit that at one point. So I thought it would make a nice background. You love all the value added you get to this course. It's not only human resource management, you get a little bit of geography and you get a little bit of history. Just too good to you people. All right, so that being the case, Chapter 6, like I said, training or employee learning, which is training, orientation, and development. Let's take a look. All right, so the key idea of this whole thing is ongoing employee learning is crucial for organizational effectiveness and growth, keyword growth. Employee learning starts with orientation, continues with training, and can progress to development. All right, so essentially why we bother with training and development and orientation is to make the organization more effective. Obviously, you want growth. And there are three phases here. Orientation when you start, training ongoing with your current job, and then development stuff you do for future jobs. All right, fairly straightforward stuff. There are 5 learning objectives for this one, and most of them are centered around the 3 main themes of training, orientation, and development. The last 2 deal with development. So we'll get to those in excruciating detail a little bit later on. Let's take a look at the first one. Okay, learning objective 1, discuss how to link training, learning, and development to organizational needs and strategies. So the whole idea is if we're going to do this stuff, you should have a point of doing stuff, which is kind of good advice for almost anything in life. Okay, so we'll start with terminology, and these are the kind of the 3 phases: orientation, training, and development. Orientation, stuff you need to know to get started in your new job. So first couple days in the job, they're going to show you around. You might have to read some manuals. You might do some on-the-job training. What else? Fill out a whole bunch of forms. All that stuff that you need to do in the first couple days is known as orientation, so you can actually start to begin to do your job if you're a server at Tim Hortons or you're an instructor at Medicine Hat College. No, onboarding refers to an enhanced orientation process. And I'll go into this in a little more detail. Some people use onboarding and orientation as the same term. I tend to think onboarding as an enhanced orientation policy. So with onboarding, you might do stuff for an entire year. I mean, when we were at Grand Prairie Regional College, new people, as part of their onboarding process, they did activities right up to the end of their first year of employment. All right, more on this later. Okay, so orientation stuff you need to know, get started. Training, learning experience and activities that help you with your current job. All right, so for example, I've been learning how to use Blackboard over the past month or so here while doing these. Some of it's on the job learning, but I've also been working with a trainer, and there's also some little videos and stuff like that about how to use Blackboard. So how to use Blackboard for me was training to do my current job. And development, learning experience and activities that help you with a future job. So when I was working in Grand Prairie, for example, I had a secondment for about a year and a half, where I led the student recruiting initiative. And the idea behind that was, at that time I had my eye on the job of being registrar at the college there. So by spending a little bit of time in leading the student recruitment, that was preparing me for that job. Never happened for a variety of reasons, but anyway, that's neither here nor there. Okay, so that's an example of a developmental. So something that you do that will prepare you for a future job. Okay, so leading student recruitment as a stepping stone to being the registrar. Okay, so training versus development. Key thing here, training, your focus is current, development for future job, use of work experiences. I read over this 3 or 4 or 5 times and I can't figure this out, so cross it out. I don't know what they're trying to get across with that one. Anyway, goal of training, preparation for the current job, development, preparation for changes or for future job, right? Participation, training required. Okay, so it's stuff that people have to do in order to be able to do their job. Development is voluntary. Okay, so after a point, when I was at Grand Prairie College, I realized I didn't want to become the registrar anymore, so I stopped doing developmental activities towards that particular goal. Just did a lot more training around teaching because that's kind of what I enjoyed. Okay, why training and development here? Okay, a couple reasons why, and you can kind of divide these into 2 major parts. So there's sort of the organization reason, which is 1 and 4, and the employee reasons, which are 2 and 3. All right. So why would we train and develop our employees? Number 1, to get most out of your investment in human capital. So if we spend time actually training our salespeople on how to sell better, we should sell better, we should make more money. It's kind of the obvious one. New psychological contracts. These days, you can't guarantee employees lifetime job security, but you can attract employees by offering the ability to develop skills and abilities. So organizations like accounting firms and banks for entry-level jobs, they tend to pay pretty poorly, to be honest with you. However, you know, the idea there is they'll hire a lot of people for entry-level positions. They'll stay there for 2 or 3 years. They'll get paid poorly, but they'll earn a load of really good experience, okay, that they can use elsewhere. So basically, in lieu of salary, if you get training, yeah, that's what employees are looking at, right? Somewhat related to that is your employment brand. Again, if you are an employer who's known for training, that'll give you a advantage when you're recruiting. I worked for the Hudson's Bay for a number of years when I was right out of school, way back when, in the 80s, which was a wonderful time, by the way. Disco was over, but skinny black ties, yeah, it was a really good time. All right, so employment brands. So if you were going to work for a department store at that time, the Bay was the one to work for. Why? Because, well, they didn't pay well like any department store, but anyway, they were renowned for their training, right? And when I was out interviewing for jobs later, after I'd worked at the Bay, it seemed like every 3rd or 4th person I ran into had worked for the Bay at one point because of and spoke well of it because of the training they gave. And the last part here is kind of related to competitive advantage here, but foreign companies are investing heavily in the workforce. So if you are in a global market and you want to keep up with your global competitors, you got to make sure that your people are as good as their people. So training will allow you to do this. Okay, so linking employee learning to strategy. Okay, so 3 strategic goals, why you do it. Number 1, to improve organizational performance, i.e. we train we train our salespeople. We should sell more. Enhancing individual employee performance, kind of pretty much the same idea there, right? But give them skills which they can use perhaps later on, either in other jobs with your organization or with other organizations. And finally, developing organizational leaders. We do developmental opportunities because people who are in the vice presidential and presidential positions eventually are going to move on, and we need to develop new leaders. All right, so that's the 3 reasons we do that. 2 important terms here: continuous learning. Okay, and so employees are always learning new things. Okay, and just to give you an example, I've been teaching for 30 years, and I've always done a lot of training just to sort of feel to keep up, because I still need to learn things, because yeah, I'm still learning things about teaching. A lot of reasons, because students are changing, and I need to change as well in order to adapt to the changes that we're seeing with students right now. And the other thing is, an organization should foster a learning culture. So an organization showing commitment to training, basically that, yeah, you know, learning is important. You're expected to learn this. We're expected to move forward as an organization, right? So that's known as a learning culture. Cycle back then to objective 1. Okay, what do we want? Do you get out of these things? Well, a couple things. I want you to get out of here. First of all is employee learning. When we talk about that, and that's really 3 things, which is orientation and training and development. And why do you do employee learning? Basically for 2 reasons: to make the organization better, and as an incentive for employees. Okay, it's one of the benefits for working there is getting trained. Right then, our second learning objective says, explain how to carry out the steps in a complete instructional design process. And this is a rather long objective, so buckle in, because this is going to take a while, all right? And there are 5 steps to this instructional design process, which we will go through in excruciating detail. All right, take a look. What's it look like? Okay, so here are the stages of instructional design, and we'll break each one of these down into an individual slide or 2 coming up here. All right, so for the purposes of this instructional design process, what I'm going to do is I'll give you an example. Let's say the example is going to be Jimmy Jojo's real estate brokerage and shoe repair, because everyone needs their shoes repaired, right? But we're going to focus mostly on the real estate brokerage side, okay? And what's happening in the real estate market in Jimmy Jojo's hometown is every other real estate brokerage is doing well. They're just doing really, really well. The market is great, but for some reason, Jimmy Jojo's real estate brokerage isn't doing as well. Their sales are down actually when everybody else is up. And really what his inkling is, or his inkling, that's a good word, he suspects that it has to do with the skills of his salespeople, because everybody's selling roughly the same type of product. The pricing is pretty much the same, but the for whatever reason, his sales are down. All right, so he thinks he's got a training problem here, right? So he's going to look at, I think the solution to this, or he perceives the solution to this, is to be a sales training program for his brokers. He starts with, Jimmy Jojo starts with assess the needs for training. So for the purposes of this example, let's say it's we feel that is a training problem here. Ensure the readiness for training. Okay, so are the people ready to be trained? Is the organization, do they have the resources? Are they ready for training? Then you'll plan the training program. You need objectives, okay, which are goals for the training. Trainers, do we use internal people? Do we use outside people? And the methods of training. So is it lecture training? Is it a online training? Is it on-the-job training? That sort of thing. Finally, you implement the training program. So you use what are called the principles of learning. One of the principles of learning is repetition. So make sure you have repetition in there. Ensure there's a transfer of learning. So once you've learned this stuff, how are you going to put it on the job? And then finally, evaluate the results of the training. Did it work? Okay, like I said, we'll go through each one of these in somewhat excruciating detail, starting off with the needs assessment. So what a needs assessment is, the process of determining what kind of trainings, if any, is necessary. So the example here, management notice a common repeatable error, a new law comes into effect, new technology is introduced, etc. Okay, or in this case, we find that our sales are down. Okay, well, everybody else's sales are up in the market. Okay. So when you do a needs assessment, you have to look at the organization, the people, and the tasks. So the organizational, is our strategy okay? Do we have the resources to put training? Is management supporting training? And I think in this case, we'll check that checks all the boxes. Person analysis. Is it a competency gap? Do these people know how to sell? And I think we've determined no, that they need some work there, right? And are they capable of learning? Yes, they're capable of learning, because these people we have who are brokers were either tradespeople or fairly successful admin assistants before coming in. So they're competent enough people. It just, like I said, they just don't know how to sell. And task analysis and competencies that need to be trained. So in this case here, we're going to look at I think it's a 7-step sales approach. So prospect, approach, needs assessment, demonstration, close-up, and follow-up. I'm missing a step in there. All right, so those are the tasks. They need to know a little bit about prospecting. They need to know how to do an approach. They need to have to put together a sales demonstration. They need to know how to close, and they need to know how to follow up. Okay, you got it good. So we've got a pretty good needs assessment. We can go on to the second step, which is determining the readiness for learning. So a combination of employee characteristics and positive work environments needed for training can proceed. Okay, I missed a step here. Let me go back here. All right, so first of all, okay, obviously, if management is the people who've identified with a need for training, obviously they're on site, so that's good. So now the employees' residents, cognitive ability, are they able to do this? And like I said, these people are tradespeople or admin assistants, so certainly they have the literacy, they have the skills to learn, right? Everybody's got a high school diploma, let's say, for example. Are they highly motivated to learn? Absolutely, okay, because Jimmy Jojo is unhappy about not making sales. These people are really unhappy about not making sales because they're on a commission basis, so they are motivated to learn how to do their job better. The work environment, lack of money, timing, training, and tools. I think one of the things is if they're in training, they're not going to be out there selling, so there's going to be a little bit of pushback on, where are they going to find the time for this? And maybe we can address that during the design phase. And social support, providing positive feedback and encouragement. And like I said, management's going to be on side for this, so I think we've got that checked off. All right, so I think we're ready for learning. Now we go into the planning and design. So start with effective training objectives. Okay. What are they expected to do, quality level, and conditions to apply? So one training objective might be around prospecting for new clients. One training objective might be around closing. One training objective might be around how to do a good demonstration. Okay, when you're face-to-face with the client here. Yeah, so figure out what they need to do. There should be performance standards that are measurable and resources needed to carry out the desired tasks and income. So we're going to need things like training materials. We're going to need time to do this. If we go online, we're going to need the capability to put it online here. Okay, so an example might be for a safety course. After completing the safety course, an employee will be able to identify 15 common workplace safety hazards with 100% accuracy under normal working conditions. Now that is a wonderful objective here. Let's see if we put one together for our salespeople. After completing the course, the agent will be able to apply the 7-step selling process to selling real estate. All right, so that's not quite as good as this one here, particularly in terms of standards and measurable, but you kind of got the idea here. All right, as always, avoid illegal demonstration. Trainees should not be excluded from training based on age, gender, etc. So another shout out there for human rights. Hooray. Okay, so other things. Trainers, in-house as opposed to out-house. No, that's not right. In-house. Okay, so do you use in-house trainers? So these are people who are already working for the organization, or contractors. Do you bring in the expert from outside? In-house allows the training to be fully customized to the needs of your unique workplace. It's usually very expensive. Generally, you have to be a very large organization to have people whose job it is just to be a trainer. To give you an example, I worked at the phone company at the time. I think we had about 12,000 trainers. And yes, there are 12,000 employees, and we did have, I think, 3 or 4 people whose job was just to be sales trainers. All right. In Jimmy Jojo's brokerage and shoe repair, probably looking at what, 15, 20 people working there. Yeah, you're not going to be able to afford an in-house trainer. I mean, you could get Jimmy Jojo to do the training if he is skilled in that sort of thing, but chances are you're relying on a contractor or an outside person. Okay, so these can be specialized professional trainers, but they may not understand the unique needs of your organizations. They may not be intimately familiar with the ins and outs of real estate or the ins and outs of how Jimmy Jojo's runs, the way he rolls. Okay, so categories of training methods, and there's 2 here. So there's basically presentation methods, hands-on methods, or group or team building methods, right? So presentation methods are things like lectures, workbooks, video clips, etc. Really good for conveying facts or comparing alternatives. Hands-on methods, learners are actively involved in trying out skills. So on-the-job training, simulation, role plays. Role plays are great for sales training. Computer simulation, computer games. Okay, so these are good for teaching specific skills, showing how skills are related to the job. Okay, how to cook an egg, for example, might be a specific skill which you'd do on-the-job training for that. Group or team building exercise. Learners share experiences, ideas, build group identities, learn about teams, so discussions, experiential team training. Okay, and these are really good for team building. All right, a couple of different examples. You've seen probably a lot of these things. So classroom instruction, audio visuals, computer-based e-learning. You've done a lot of these. Case studies, behavior modeling with role-playing, experiential programs. One of the things in your textbook talked about the blanket exercise. I believe it's in this. It's in this one. It's in one of the chapters there. That's an example of an experiential learning program there. Team training and or on-the-job training. So there's a number of different ways you could do this. What I would say in the example here, if I'm trying to train half a dozen sales reps who are on commission, who are real estate brokers, I'm thinking something like a computer-based training would work really well here, something they could do on their own with modules. Okay, that way they can sort of fit it in on their time rather than having to take time out when they could be selling. Okay, once you've designed your program, a couple things to keep in mind. One of the principles of learning, and I'd like to, when I went through this list, I started patting myself on the back because I think about the way this course is designed, and many of these principles of learning you'll see in both the lectures and the slides, and just the way this whole course is laid out. Okay, so number 1, communicate learning objectives. Tell people what you want them to learn. An example in this course would be the learning objectives. Okay, you've got 4 or 5 for each chapter here, and they're pretty clear about this is what I want you to learn. Attention getting mix, focus on the key points. So note here, oh, what gets your attention? The red. Yeah, highlighting. Okay, that sort of thing. All right, focuses on the key points. Limit the content, chunk info, be visual, repeat stuff. Repeat, repeat, repeat. Okay. If you want to tell what's the one thing I was taught about teaching? Tell them what you want to tell them. Tell them what you told them. Okay, is a really good little simple rule to use. Guide and elaborate, relate to prior knowledge. So the example is a really good thing here, right? So try to find some common ground with people and provide an example. So I don't know, example I use Tim Hortons a lot because everybody's been to Tim Hortons. Assuming you've been to Tim Hortons. So you're able to relate to that, right? As opposed to, trying to relate examples to, I don't know, being a PhD in a nuclear physics lab. Not many of you have that experience. Provide memory cues. What good word here is mnemonics. Isn't that a great word? I love that spelling, mnemonics. That's where you put like letters together to make a word. All right. So in your organizational behavior course last term, you might have done a bit on goal setting. And one of the mnemonics they use is SMART goals. Remember that? Goals need to be SMART. SMART being specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timely. Okay, that's a mnemonic, right? So, or a memory clue. Okay, that's usually good. I'll learn include memory cues. Transfer content to the workplace. So, action plan for new learning. So, having the information available on a website, having little cheat sheets or little cards with the key points are a way to do that. And another one is provide performance feedback. How am I doing? And you'll get some feedback very quickly on a evaluation we did the other day, which is called the midterm examination. All right, so these are all good principles of learning to incorporate into your training program. Transfer of learning. Okay, equals on-the-job use of knowledge, skills, and behaviors. So I could tell you a whole bunch of things about sales. I could give you the 7-step sales training process, but then when you get out there, if you never use it, that's pointless. All right. So effective transfer requires social supports, communities of practice. Okay, so as a manager, we would start using things like the word closing. So ABC, always be closing. All right. That was a great sale. How did you do on the close? Even using the terminology. Okay, have you done any prospecting in the last little bit? Okay, what did you do for prospecting? So actually reinforcing, using the stuff, right? Even the use of language in particular is really, really important. So technical support, so learning management systems like MS Blackboard, okay, online instruction videos, having the stuff on a website. And self-management tools, so quick checklists, quick summary cards, etc. So maybe I could put together a checklist or summary card with a really quick example of what the 7 steps of sales process are. And finally, we come up with measurements of results, like anything. Plan, do, and check. So this is a check. Effective training equals transfer application of learning to actual job performance. And there's 5 ways to measure. And these are from the least involved and probably least effective to most involved and most effective. So number 1, learner reaction. Okay, and these were called happiness sheets. So you do the course and then you hand everybody a 10-question survey. How did you do? Did you learn a lot? Oh yeah, I learned a ton in this particular course. All right, so essentially how happy were they with the experience of going through the class, okay? Easy to do, not terribly effective at measuring results. Better way, demonstrate learning, relatively easy to do, immediate feedback, example, a knowledge test. Okay, so give you a test at the end of the thing and see, were you able to retain all 7 steps of the selling process? Do you know 5 different ways to close, etc.? Better yet, behavior change, difficult to do, delayed feedback, monitor. Example, monitor and track how people answer the phone if you've given them a phone answering course or something like that. So behavior change, seeing if they're actually applying some of these steps, seeing if they're prospecting, seeing if they're using some of those techniques we talked about closing in the sales course. This is the gold standard. Here we go. Business results, very difficult to resolve, very delayed feedback. Example, improving customer sales. Ultimately, why we did this is we wanted to sell more real estate. Are we selling more real estate? And if so, can it be attributed to this particular course? And finally, the last one, cost benefit, which is business results plus cost analysis. All right, so yes, we are selling more real estate. Hooray, that's really good, good stuff. But how much did we spend on this training program? And did the cost of the training program merit the additional sales that we have, right? You know, did we basically made a profit? Did we get a return on investment from the training versus the performance improvement? Okay, so that was a rather long, drawn out objective. Let's cycle back, talk about that, explain how to carry out the steps in a complete instructional design process. Okay, so what do you need to remember? You need to remember that there are 5 steps. And the 5 steps are a needs assessment, so know what a needs assessment is. Number 2, readiness for learning. Is the organization, are the learners ready to learn? You have to plan the program. Okay, so you have objectives, for example, for the program. You have to figure out what training modality you're going to use. Is it going to be a lecture? Is it going to be online? Is it going to be on the job? Number 4, implement it. So actually run the course. If you're running a course, again, using your principles of learning is a good thing to keep in mind when you're implementing it. And then finally evaluating it. Did it work? Okay, and that can range from were people happy with it, okay, to right to the bottom line, to the last one is, did the amount of money that we spent on this, was it worth it for the result that we got in dollars and cents? All right, we beat that one to death. This one's a little shorter. Learning objective number 3, describe the methods for orientation and onboarding and supporting diversity and inclusion. This last part is kind of a weird one. We're going to focus most on this first part. And to me, orientation, it's one of my favorites, okay? Because I just think of, boy, when I started at Grand Prairie Regional College, the orientation was both really, really good and really, really bad. The college part, like they did, was brilliant. The department part was done really poorly, and I think that was a result of we had a really weak chairperson at that time. So anyway, I'm babbling here. But yeah, orientation is important, right? Because you want to get off on the right foot. And obviously, if you don't start on the right foot, people get discouraged and they may end up leaving 3 months, 6 months down the road. So it's important to get people off on the right foot here. Okay, goals for a 4-stage onboarding process. Okay, so if we talked about onboarding, onboarding was basically an enhanced orientation program. So orientation usually deals with these first 2, which is compliance and clarification. So compliance, understanding company policy, rules, regulations. So first thing you do when you get somebody in is they're in human resources and they're filling out forms, okay? They're filling out tax forms. They're filling out payroll forms, things like that, just so that you can just so that you can pay them legally, for example. They're also ticking off policies and rules, things like that. So if there's non-disclosure or conflict of interest policies quite often. So that's kind of the stuff you're doing. HR does that in the usually first half of the first day that you're working there, right? Next part, which is again done early, is clarification, understanding the job and performance expectations. So quite often this is there's on the job training that you really need to do. That might be safety training. It might just be really basic stuff like how to use the computer system, right? The other thing which you get a little bit right off the bat is culture and connection. So you might get a little bit of company history right away. And then connection, they might introduce you to people you're working with, right? What makes a orientation program an onboarding program is really much more emphasis on this stuff here. So the fact that, and this is the stuff you're going to do, over a month couple months, even a year, right? So connection. I mean, one of the things that they did at Grand Prairie Regional College is that they paired us up with a mentor. And we were meeting with this mentor once a month. Another thing they did with connection is all the people who started in that particular year, we were kind of a team, right? And as a team, all the newbies met after 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, and a year, right? Just to talk about our experience, right? And sort of share the experience. And that was really helpful for the connection part and the culture part, really, especially with the mentorship, is understanding company history, traditions, value, norms, and mission, right? So again, you need to do all this stuff. What makes a program onboarding as orientation is really this last stuff you're doing. And rather than thinking, okay, I can get all orientation done within the first 3 days or the first week, if you extend it over a month, 6 months, a year, you could really work on this part. And, I think you get a person better oriented and with better understanding of the organization. And having done that, you should result in lower turnover. Now, this next one here is, I don't know, kind of disjointed. They threw it in here with orientation. I really don't know why, but whatever. But it's another, what do you call it, advertisement, I guess, for diversity and inclusion, because that seems to be one of the big themes of this course, right? So, diversity training is skills needed to work in a diverse workforce, cultural awareness, etc. One of the things they did at Grand Prairie is we had a Aboriginal awareness workshop that we had to do, right? Because many of our students were Aboriginal or Indigenous students, so the fact that they came from a different background was really helpful for us, right? So yeah, sometimes in some organization we'll have sort of an introduction to the LGBTQ plus community, all right, just to give you more of awareness of those people and being able to work with them, right? Generational diversity, those are things like understanding millennials or understanding, what is it, Generation Z. Okay, these are the next frontier here. All right, so the point about this one, about diversity inclusion, oftentimes that can be started during an orientation program, but again, if that's something that's important to your organization, make sure you have training for that. And like I said, quite often this training happens right off the bat. Okay, so like I said, short learning objective backthing describes the methods for employee orientation and onboarding. What did I want to say about that? Okay, to recap then, is orientation is something that gets you started. Okay, and it's things like filling out your forms, doing the legal stuff, getting your basic training. But there's also the part about learning the culture of the organization and history, and then finally making connections within the organization, people you're working with and directly and some other people there, right? And I guess the other part of that, the diversity and inclusion, is if that's something your organization is really big on, oftentimes that sort of training starts with the orientation and onboarding process. All right, we are now on learning objective 4, which is a nice short one, which talks about discuss the approaches that organizations used for employee development. All right, remembering that employee development is for future jobs, unlike training, which is for the current jobs, or orientation, which is just when you're starting a job. Okay, so there are 4 aspects of employee development, 2 on this slide and 2 on the next. First one is formal education. So for example, a company will often sponsor employees who engage in ongoing professional development, like an MBA program, for example, for engineers. The first job I ever had in human resources when I was working for the phone company was I was in charge of approving courses for employees who wanted to take university or college courses after hours as professional development, which was a really, really cool job. Well, that was most of my job. Assessment is a second aspect of employee development, and assessment, we can talk about formal testing. So you can do things like your Myers-Briggs, or find out if you're an introvert or an extrovert, how much empathy you have, that sort of stuff. You can do a battery of these tests. That's called an assessment center, and or performance appraisals. And performance appraisals will be covered in the next, I think it's the next chapter here when we do performance management. But one particular type of performance appraisal which is used for development is called 360-degree feedback. So in a 360-degree feedback formal performance appraisal, you get input not only from your bosses, but from your peers and subordinates, sometimes customers as well, right? So a 360-degree performance appraisal will really give you some insight into into your performance and how people perceive you, things like that, right? Okay, and then from these assessments, then action plans to work on your strengths and weaknesses. You may have to become more empathetic, okay? Or you may want to continue to, if you're a strong writer, continue to pursue areas where your strong writing skills allow you to shine. Okay, the other two aspects of employee development are job experiences, and this could be like promotions, secondments, lateral moves, job rotations, special projects. I'll talk a little bit about secondment. A secondment is where they give you a job on another job on a temporary basis, and quite often could be outside your comfort zone. Classic secondment would be in a production-oriented company. You'd have an engineer, and if that engineer was being groomed to be a vice president or president someday, they might have a secondment into the marketing department for a year or two, or even into human resources for a year or two, just to round out their business experience if the engineer has only ever been in production their whole period of time there. Special projects are another thing. When I was with the phone company, one of the things they gave me was I was working on the Employee United Way campaign for the company. So, and again, so a project like that gives you some exposure to other people in the company, also allows you to work on specific skills you may not be getting in your particular job. So like a volunteer project or something like that can also be part of that. Okay, so various different job experiences. The last one is interpersonal relationships. Networking probably would have been a better term for this. It's easier to remember. So with that, you're looking at mentors, okay? And a mentor can be formal people, like people can, the company can actually assign you, and informal people. You might just gravitate towards certain people that you like or know, or are friends who can help you. And the other part is coaching, right? So, getting help from supervisors or peers. And the third part of interpersonal is FaceTime with senior executives. The bigwigs need to know you, get to know you, right? So being invited to particular meetings or maybe social events sometimes with senior executives can be a big part of that. Okay, so that was a fairly simple objective. And discuss the approaches organizations use for employee development. So there were four things. The first one was education, like courses, for example. Second one is assessments, can be performance appraisals or psychological testing, that sort of thing. Job experiences was the third one, like a secondment or a special project. And the last one is networking, making sure that you're meeting people for the company, particularly senior executives. All right, final objective for this one is objective 5, explore the steps in the career management process, okay, including creating a development plan and consideration for high potential employees. So if you focus on the red writing here, that's what we want you to get out of this particular objective. Talk a little bit about career management. So both the employee and employer have responsibilities in an employee's career development. you've got to be doing something, but the company's also got to be supporting you. Okay, so your responsibilities are things like self-assessment, so taking the psychological tests, for example, asking for feedback, asking for a 360-degree performance appraisal, identifying and setting goals, developing an action plan with a timetable, and most importantly, actually doing the plan. The employer's responsibility, essentially, they got to have your back. So they got to provide the resources, the assessments, and opportunities. So let's say, for example, if I were a younger man, maybe I want to be the academic vice president at one day at Medicine Hat College. All right. So to do that, what I want to do is, obviously, I'll get some assessments, okay? Figure out what my strengths and weaknesses are. Second of all, I have a goal, and my goal is I want to become the registrar within the next two years. Okay, because I hear the job's coming open. It's not coming open. This is really hypothetical. I'm sure a registrar's doing a fine job. And the last one is I'm going to finish my PhD by 2025. Yeah, like that will ever happen. All right, so that's kind of my plan. So what is the employer's responsibilities? Well, give me a fair shake when I apply for the registrar's job, support me, give me funding to pursue courses for my PhD. And yeah, just some of the senior executives basically being available to, just sort of socially and also as mentors to help me in my, right? They got to provide support here. Okay, developmental plan is something that which would come out of this process here. So it's a document which summarizes an employee's strengths, areas for improvement, career goals, and next steps. Right, so that'd be a formal document. So if you want to take a look at what it look like, I'll give you this reference in your book, Figure 6.8 on page 163. Now, career management system. So this kind of shows you how you'd piece together all those elements we talked about in the previous slide here, right? And there are 4 steps. There's the data gathering, feedback, goal setting, action plan, and follow-up. Okay, so data gathering, 2 things. A lot of it tends to be focused on the performance management or performance appraisal process, which we'll cover in the next chapter. The other thing with data gathering, when I was with AGT, we actually had a separate process. It was called potential assessment. And it was separate from the performance management or performance appraisal process here. And that was focused on, rather than how you've done at your job, what are your strengths and weaknesses, and most importantly, what are your likes, dislikes, and goals, and things like that. So you might have in addition to performance management, you might have something like a potential assessment process to give you the data that will go into your developmental plan. Feedback, again, a lot of the feedback comes through the performance management process, but also ongoing feedback through kind of coaching, mentors is also important. Goal setting. So again, you want to involve your coaches, mentors. Your goals want to be congruent with your strengths, or your goals might be to overcome some of your weaknesses. But essentially, the developmental plan is really the product of at the end of your goal setting process. And finally, action plan and follow-up. Okay, again, a lot of the follow-up might come through the performance management process. There might be separate career development meetings as well that might be separate from the process or involved at the same. But again, getting feedback, just seeing where you are with your goals, and if you meet your goals, great. If you don't meet your goals, adjusting, doing things different so you do meet your goals. All right, so those are the 4 steps. Now, the final slide in this particular learning objective deals with high potential employees. So these are your superstars in any organization. Any organization has your superstars, and one of the things, if you want to move the organization forward, is care and feeding of these high potential employees or superstars. is important for succession planning, because these are your future presidents and vice presidents, right? So succession planning then is a process of identifying and grooming HPEs, aka also known as your superstars for future leader positions. Okay, so a little bit about the career management process for these superstars. It all starts with selection, all right? So you know, you want to get really, really good people, obviously, when you're hiring people. So the best of the best you hire, that might, you know, these are the people who are potentially your superstars or your HPEs. And then again, they can verify that by actually having outstanding performance, having very good performance appraisals, right? Accomplishing stuff. So that's the first part. The second part is developmental experiences. Okay, so things like secondments, for example, putting an engineer in human resources or marketing for a while as a secondment. FaceTime with senior executives, perhaps volunteer experience as well. Anything that'll give them skills that will help them to progress to be a senior manager. And then active involvement with senior leaders. Again, can't be stressed enough the fact that they got to hang with some of these presidents and vice presidents, because they can be valuable as mentors and coaches in your high potential employees' career development in order to be a president and or vice president. Recap that one really quickly. Okay, so here we are back at Learning Objective 5 here to recap. So explore the steps in the career management process, including a development plan and consideration for high potential employees. All right, so to recap, the 4 phases of a career management process are the data gathering, feedback, goal setting, and action plan, okay, which is the 1. And the second part of this is high potential employees. So know that high potential employees are your superstars. These are your future leaders. And if you want a sustainable organization, you have to identify these people and motivate them, care and feed them so they can actually step into those positions. All right, we are at the end of chapter 5. So at the end, let's take a look at what are the things that we want you to know from this particular chapter. Number 1, organizations pursue strategic goals for TLD, training, learning, and development. All right, so why do you want to do training, learning, and development? Well, you want to move your organization forward. You may need it to solve a problem, like you're not selling enough. It gives people tools to succeed in the organization, okay, when you do orientation and training. And finally, sustainability, right? If you want ongoing excellence, you've got to be able to replace your leaders, right, in a seamless way. So you want to be doing that proactively rather than waiting for somebody to quit or die and then being in a crisis there for a while. Number 2. Talks about the instructional design process. So know what that is: the needs assessment, readiness, planning, implementing, and evaluating results. We went through that in quite a bit of excruciating detail. Number 3, methods for orientation and onboarding. Remembering that onboarding is an enhanced orientation process. So orientation was mostly focused on getting people up to speed, whereas the onboarding part was really concerned with culture and creating connections, all right? Number 4, employee development is future focused. So again, the developmental process, the 4 developmental processes of education, assessment, job experiences, and networking. And finally, the last part is the career management process, okay, that has several steps, and in particularly your high potential employees, okay, they're really important people. Make sure you're identifying them, developing them so they are ready to step into those senior positions. Get her, got her, good. That is chapter 6, and in chapter 7, which is coming up next, we will get into performance management.